Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Mark Moss Show. We're always talking about the decentralized revolution. We're talking about deglobalization. We're talking about how the world is changing through politics, finance, and technology. We talk about all three because if you don't understand how they all work together, you don't have context of the world. I don't like to talk about politics for politics' sake, but you have to understand all three together. And I think there's something that really big happened this last week that most people maybe don't quite understand what's going on. Now, I talk about this from a political standpoint, not from a right or left, a red or blue, a liberal Democrat. I talk about it more, my viewpoint is more we the people versus the government. Supposedly, the United States is a representative government, a representative democracy, if you want to call it that. They say it's a democracy. Technically, we're not. But even a democracy would be what the people want, what the majority want. And what the majority wants today is not having $33 trillion in debt. What the majority wants today is not approving hundreds of millions of dollars to go to Middle Eastern countries for gender studies. What the majority of people want today is not hundreds of millions or billions of dollars going to drop bombs on people in lands far away. What the American people want is restraint. That's what they want. So this is not a political divided issue. This should not be a bipartisan issue. Again, this is, if it's democracy, if it's a republic, it's what do the people want? And it's very clear what the people want. And the people do not want the government to continue spending their kids' futures away. And so, unfortunately, as I said, I don't view this as a left or right issue because, unfortunately, I look at the politics more as a uniparty. And that's just really where we're at. Look, you have the Republicans grandstanding, trying to hold Democrats accountable. The Democrats want to spend $1 trillion. The Republicans want to spend $900 billion. I mean, look, they both want to spend more. Donald Trump spent more than any president in history, and Obama spent more than any president in history before him, and every president has spent more than the last president. Biden's going, hold my beer, watch me now. He's trying to way outdo Trump, but it's a uniparty. However, I do believe that there are a few good people there. I do believe it. Now, I think there's a lot of good intending people that probably have wrong intentions. There's also a lot of people that probably go in with good intentions and quickly find out that they're neutered and they can't do those things. But what we saw happen in the Republican Party this week might maybe change things and potentially maybe just slow things down a little bit. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the Speaker of the House, McCarthy, was ousted by his own party. So the Republican Party led a coup to get the Republican Speaker of the House kicked out. And it's the first time, I believe it's the first time it's ever happened, at least since like the 1800s. And so it's a pretty big deal. But I don't want to dig into the politics of what happened and who voted and all those things. But I want to dig into what I believe is the core reason why and why I think it's important and why I think it can change things, hopefully. I don't believe that we can vote our way out of this, so I don't hang all my hope into the political system, but it is something to be aware of because if you want to understand how to position your investments, if you want to understand what's going to happen with your stocks, your equities, your retirement, your gold, your real estate, your Bitcoin, if you want to know what happens with those things, then you have to understand what's happening with the economy, and you have to understand what the Fed would do because of the economy, and then you have to understand what the politicians are doing to understand all of that. Okay, so as I talk about quite often, we can see that inflation has really been driven by the Fed spending, the government spending, the fiscal spending. They have no restraint, as I'm talking about. So if we bring some restraint, does that slow down spending? If we slow down spending, does that slow down inflation? If we slow down inflation, what does that do to our assets? And so it's important to understand it from that level. And again, it's sort of just fascinating. But the piece that I want to dig into, again, you can go get your news anywhere. I want to tell you what it means. And so what I think is happening here, and I don't say this just opinionated. This is what they're saying. But Matt Gaetz led this sort of charge to get McCarthy out. And really because McCarthy originally couldn't get the votes to even take the seat in the first place. And they continued to delay. They weren't going to give him the seat. And finally, he had to agree. They had to make an agreement. If he was given the seat, that he would do certain things. And he continues to cave to the Democrats over and over and over, making it look like it's a uniparty. Like, what is he even doing? The way that the government is supposed to be set up is it's supposed to provide checks and balances. Now, that could be a good and bad thing. It prevents a lot of progress from happening, but it's supposed to. It's supposed to have checks and balances. And so McCarthy just continued to cave and cave and cave and cave and cave and everything, and there was no checks and balance. And Matt Gaetz said, look, you are not upholding your agreement. And then McCarthy said, fine, then file a motion to get me out. And so Gaetz did, and he got him out. But here's the story that I'm picking up on that I think is important. Since 1996, something fundamentally changed in the government. And what do I talk about that? So the Senate controls the purse. The Senate controls how much the government can spend. And so every year they have budget meetings. They're supposed to have budgets, and all these different divisions have different spending bills, different budgets, and each one is supposed to be looked at individually based off of the merits of that bill and either approved or denied. That's what we learned in civics class. That's how the government works. You have committees, and they vote to, what gets included in those. But something changed in 1996. Now, you don't have to go back that far to understand this. You probably know by now, every year in October, it's the same story. We have the budget. The budget doesn't get passed. If we don't approve the budget, then the government runs out of money. So then we pass a continuing resolution, a CR, which continues to fund the government for up to 45 days. And then around December, around Christmas, all of a sudden, hey, if we don't pass this budget, everything shuts down. And at the last minute, they put forward what's called an omnibus bill. An omnibus bill, I forget last year, Rand Paul, I think it was, brought it, printed out, in a wagon up before Congress. And I talked about it extensively on my show. You saw it talked about everywhere. And just the insanity of bringing 4,100 pages. So 4,100 page bill for $1.7 trillion was brought forward a couple of days before Christmas. Now, the average person can read about 30 pages an hour. So if you take 4,100 divided by 30, that's 136 hours. Say you read for 4 hours a day, that's going to take you 34 days divided by 4 or 5 days a week. It's a couple of months to read through this. Now, that's just to read it. But what about to understand it? What about to do your research on it? What about to discuss it? So this takes months to even get through, not even to debate. But yet here they do within a couple of days, going into the Christmas break, a gun to your head, you have to approve it. Now, they do this specifically because they want to put in a whole bunch of what they call pork, just a bunch of crap that nobody would approve. If the American people or our representatives in government saw that, hey, we want to send $300 million to Iran for gender studies, or hey, we want to spend $1 billion to bomb Yemen, if they saw that, they would say, heck no. No way. No way are we doing that. Not when we have $33 trillion in debt. No. But they don't do that. They put it all together. And what Matt Gaetz is saying he wants to do, and I believe him, he wants to end that process. It's been done that way since 1996. They want to end the omnibus bill package. And instead, now they want Congress to bring each of the 12 annual spending bills to the floor via the process that is supposed to have one by one by one. So now the representatives can look at each one and approve and deny each one. The American people can see each one together. And so what McCarthy was doing these continuing resolutions, these CRs, that would push us to the brink, just like we see every single year. And Matt Gaetz said, no. And so I'm a little hopeful. I'm a little hopeful that this could dramatically change the government. I think it could dramatically change the amount of spending that we have. Now, look, I'm not saying we're going to pay off the debt. I'm not saying they're going to get back into a balanced budget, but it's a step in the right direction. And I'm hopeful that it gives the American people maybe a little bit of hope, and maybe that energizes them to get a little bit more involved. And maybe that shows them that maybe we can start to turn the tides. Maybe it shows some of these leaders that this is what the people want. And if you want to get reelected, you should probably actually get behind what the people want and not continue to ram things down their throat that they don't want. Continue to not serve your clients. Now, we have a couple new speakers of the House that have been kind of thrown out. One of them, Donald Trump. Potentially Donald Trump could be the Speaker of the House. He said he would do it. It's kind of interesting. Rep. Jim Jordan probably one of my favorites in Congress. I mean, he is one that really, really fights for the American people. And so maybe things can change. It's pretty interesting. If this happens, again, you're not voting your way out of this. You still need to focus on yourself. You still need to focus on your own money, but you have to understand how these bills pass. You can understand the money flows, and this is a big piece of it. We saw this last week. I was talking about in the earlier segment how in the House, the Republican-led House, they kicked out the Speaker of the House, McCarthy, and now we have a interim House Speaker, and that is Patrick McHenry. Now, what's interesting about Patrick McHenry is that he's a Bitcoiner, and we know this because we remember from many, many years ago him testifying in the committees and saying, look, that Bitcoin is different. Bitcoin is decentralized. You can't stop Bitcoin. Bitcoin is different than other cryptocurrencies. Like, he gets it. Now, this is things that, unless you're deep in the weeds on Bitcoin, you don't understand. Most crypto people don't understand this, but McHenry does. And so it's pretty interesting that now, at this time, when we sort of have this antagonistic view against technology between Gary Gensler at the SEC, obviously Elizabeth Warren, and people like that, leading the charge, really trying to crack down on Bitcoin and crypto and just technology in general. We have this new interim House Speaker who's he's pro-Bitcoin. He's a Bitcoiner. And so I think this is a maybe shift that we're starting to see. At the same time, as I've been reporting over the last several weeks, we have Gary Gensler and the SEC coming under massive fire, under massive attacks from many sides. We have letters going around being circulated, getting signatures for his resignation. I talked about, I think a week or two ago, how there's actually a bill being put forward to actually change the way that the SEC is even made up, where there will no longer be Gary Gensler, there will no longer be a head of the SEC, and instead there would be just equal people on the SEC made up of both Republicans and Democrats to make it more even. And so we can see that the SEC is under a massive fire. We can see that they've been sort of getting their, should I say, butts kicked a little bit, going to court, both in the XRP case. For example, they filed an appeal on that and lost that. That just happened this week. But we also saw, well, in that case, we saw that the SEC brought this action forward, and the judge said that, well, it's sort of a security, sort of not. I don't want to get into the weeds on that. We've talked about that before. But the important part is that the SEC didn't like that answer, and so they appealed it, and now the judge denied their appeal. So we see the SEC is sort of getting their butts handed to them over and over and over again. We're also seeing it on the ETF side. So the SEC continues to deny a spot ETF from going through for really no good reason, in my opinion, and it continues to deny all the applications. And now a federal judge actually said the same thing. And so now members of Congress, I think now 4 members of Congress have signed a letter to the SEC saying you need to approve the spot ETF. And so we can see that this is starting to change. It's starting to change the makeup of, obviously, from the people. It's sort of like this, as I say, this decentralized revolution where the people get it. It works its way up into the government to the point now where we have lawmakers like Cynthia Lummis, that are Bitcoiners. Tom Emmer, he's done really well, which actually his name is being thrown around for the Speaker of the House as well. We have the interim Speaker of the House, Patrick McHenry, who's a Bitcoiner. This is a big deal. That's a very big deal. Now, this isn't tradable information. It doesn't mean the price goes up on Bitcoin today or tomorrow, but it's the directionality that we're always trying to pick up. You know, one of the big objections I always hear from non-Bitcoiners is, what if the government just makes it illegal? Well, first of all, even if they make it illegal, what does that even mean? I mean, drugs are illegal, and yet they just continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger, more profitable every year. Not to compare Bitcoin to drugs, but making something illegal doesn't just make it go away. But when you have high-ranking politicians, high-ranking members of the government that are Bitcoiners, that are hard Bitcoiners, that are knowledgeable Bitcoiners, like Patrick McHenry in the House right now, or Tom Emmer, who could potentially be the Speaker of the House next, who continues to pass bills against CBDCs that are pro-Bitcoin, when you continue to see other lawmakers like Cynthia Lummis, you can see there's a changing of the guard. You can see they're going after Gary Gensler. They're trying to change the direction that their government's going. Now, of course, this doesn't mean it just changes overnight. We can see that there's lots of other actions happening at the same time. We have The battle over Binance is still raging on. That continues to go on. We have SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried from FTX, finally going on trial. Arguably the largest fraud case in history. And what's interesting is anybody who had their money caught up in FTX, I mean, you probably want to see him hang. I didn't have any money in FTX, but I still would like to see him pay. But it's been interesting to see what might happen because he was such a big political donor. There's a lot of speculation that maybe those political donations might protect him. It was interesting to see this week that the court case finally started. And at the same time as the court case started, a book came out by Michael Lewis, who's written many good books. You might recognize the book of The Big Short, which became a movie, The Big Short. He wrote Moneyball, some other good books that became movies as well. And I'm a fan. I've liked the books, I've liked the movies, and I think he's done a very good job in reporting and digging out the facts. Or maybe it's because I didn't understand the facts in the first place. I'm having to start to reconsider this because in this new book that he's putting out, he's painting Sam Bankman-Fried in a completely different light than what it looks like happened. So now it's making me think, did he really do his research? Did he really have an agenda maybe in these other stories as well? Some of the things that he's talking about was that he claims that Sam Bankman-Fried said that he could have paid off Trump $5 billion not to run. He said that Sam Bankman-Fried was planning to give $15 to $30 million to Republican Senator Mitch McConnell to defeat the Trumpier candidates in the Senate races. That one maybe I could believe. We know that Sam Bankman-Fried was the second largest donor behind George Soros. But not a good name to be put up there with. I would probably say Mitch McConnell is certainly a rhino. He's probably he's part of the Uniparty. Sure, he's a Republican. He's probably more of a Democrat than a Republican. So maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. But somehow you have to kind of put everything in question when you see this report. But the trial did begin. Sam Bankman-Fried is facing 7 counts of fraud, conspiracy, money laundering on his alleged use of FTX customer funds on the digital currency trading platform to cover losses at his hedge fund, which is Alameda Research. Now, there's a mountain of evidence that he's used these funds to purchase all types of other assets like real estate, covered personal expenses. His parents were pulling out funds. Of course, he's pled not guilty to this. But if he's convicted, if he's found guilty on all counts, he could face a sentence of up to 110 years in prison, which is less than Bernie Sanders has. Bernie Madoff, sorry. It'll be interesting. Will he face that time, or will his political benefactors come to his rescue? Now, this next question would be, if he's found guilty, will those political donations be clawed back? Not just the immigration happening in Italy, but we also talked about what's happening in the United States specifically. And we know that I think last month set a record. It was almost 300,000 people came across the border illegally in the United States. And the borders are basically wide open. In that video on my YouTube channel, you can see videos of people literally just walking across, literally Border Patrol opening the gates and letting people across. Elon Musk, he decided to take upon himself and go down to the border because, of course, none of our leaders will go down there. So he went down to the border and he turned his phone on, his camera on, and he showed you exactly what's going on down there. It's a disaster. And, I've been talking about for a while, and Elon Musk actually talks all the time about one of the biggest threats that we face right now is actually depopulation, not some conspiratorial agenda, just the fact that we have an aging demographics that are old, and we don't have enough young people coming up below them. The U.S., we had this echo boom, this millennial generation that's pretty big, so we're a little bit better off than most developed nations, but Japan is in really, really bad shape. Europe's in bad shape. China's in really bad shape. And so we have this depopulation, and so we need immigration. And so the United States needs immigration. As a matter of fact, we're trying to re-onshore this chip manufacturing, and we're trying to get TSMC from Taiwan to set up a plant in Phoenix, Arizona. And the problem that they have is they can't get enough good quality people to work in this plant. So we need immigration. We need to bring in educated people. But what we don't need is just an open border where anybody can come across without any types of checks. We know there's plenty of reports out there that the cartels have been using this to just push as many drugs up and even human smuggling up across the border as they can. Anyway, so we've talked about this extensively. But what's interesting is that obviously we know, regardless of what political side you're on, that Donald Trump ran on a platform to close the border and build the wall. And he wanted to build the wall, and the Democrats just would not allow him to build the wall, and this became sort of this big talking point. He was able to ram some stuff through, and they were able to build some part of the wall, and then it's just been sitting there. So he wanted to close the borders, and then Joe Biden wanted to open them up, which is why now we've had millions of people come across the borders illegally. Like I said, almost 300,000 people just last month alone. Now, this has turned out to be a massive problem, and it's turned out to be such a massive problem that things are finally starting to change. It's very interesting. And it's interesting. This is why we talk about these signposts, so we can see these shifts before they happen. And so part of what's happened is that I think the Biden administration, the Democrats really like this to happen because it's happening in the southern states. And the southern states need to be turned from red to blue. But some of the southern states decided, well, what we'll do is we'll just start pushing them up into the northern states. And so we know plenty of reports of them getting up to New York City. And this is where things finally started to change. I talked about it a few weeks ago. Mayor Eric Adams in New York City said, this is such a big problem and there's no way out. He said, never have I seen this before in my life, and I don't know, there's no way that we get out of this. The governor of New York now, who was very, very, very pro-open borders, very pro allowing illegal immigration to happen, has now all of a sudden come out and switched her viewpoint and says we can no longer continue to house these people. So it's great when it pushes my political ideology, and it's great when I want to punish a red state like Texas and turn them blue. But all of a sudden when the problem shows up on my doorstep and my state has to deal with it and my state constituents have to deal with it where, shoot, I might not get elected, all of a sudden it becomes a big problem. And so now Mayor Eric Adams and the governor in New York have finally changed their mind. Now, they know that this is a big, big deal for Americans. I don't care. Again, this is not a political thing, in my opinion. I think most Americans care about this. And the Biden administration wants these borders to be open. So much, in fact, that they have been selling off, the Biden administration has been selling off the uninstalled border wall in advance of this Finish It Act being passed. We can see the Biden administration has been hawking sections of the Trump's border wall on a government military surplus website called GovPlanet, where they've auctioned off 81 batches of square structural tubing and some steel columns just since April alone. Meanwhile, illegal border crossings have gotten to the highest level on record, and last Tuesday, the Biden administration sold 700 28-foot long hollow beams in 5 separate lots for $212 each, netting $154,000. Now, this is interesting because the Democratic-led Senate passed a Republican-sponsored bill last month called the Finish It Act, aimed at forcing the administration to extend the wall. So Trump tried to get it done. Biden said, nope, leave it down. Let's bring as many people in as we can. But this Finish It Act would force the administration to extend the wall. The legislation would force the federal government to use the leftover materials on new wall construction or hand them over to Texas so Texas could put them up. Either you put them up or Texas will put them up. Instead, knowing this is going to happen, the Biden administration is rushing to liquidate the wall leftovers before the House can pass this version of the bill. So now the Biden administration is like, whoa, you're going to pass a bill forcing us either to build it or give it to Texas so they can build it. Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get rid of it all so you can't force us to do that. The sale is a wasteful and ludicrous decision by the Biden administration that only serves as further proof they have no shame, says Senator Roger Wicker, Republican from Mississippi. The pennies made from selling the border wall will not be enough to pay the families who suffer from a criminal act committed by someone who crosses our open borders during the Biden administration, said Senator James Lankford, Republican from Oklahoma. Now, I'm saying this because this just goes to show how bad the Biden administration wants to keep the wall open, that even in advance of a bill going through that would force them to finish, they're like, fine, we know we're about to be forced into it, so let's just get rid of it all. Okay? But here's the plot twist. This week, enough is enough. The pain has gotten high enough. The blue states have felt the pain high enough. And in a stunning reversal of everything that's been said over the last several years by the left, just months after, like I said, the Biden administration has been caught selling the border wall for pennies on the dollar, the Department of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, is citing, quote, an acute and immediate need, quote, to waive dozens of federal laws in order to build a border wall as the illegal immigration crisis grows utterly out of control. He said, quote, the Secretary of Homeland Security has determined pursuant to law that it is necessary to waive certain laws, regulations, and other legal requirements in order to ensure the expeditious construction of barriers and roads in the vicinity of the international land border in Starr County, Texas. So why do they need to waive laws in order to get this built? They've been trying to build this for a long time. The parts are already there. It's the Biden administration that's putting these laws in place to prevent the wall from being built. They're trying to sell it off as fast as they can so they don't even have the supplies to do it. But now, Department of Homeland Security, Mayorkas is saying, whoa, we need to do this. As a matter of fact, we need to do it so bad that we're going to go around the laws by my own political party. And so anyway, Elon Musk tweeted how times have changed, and they certainly have. Unfortunately, in the world, but even in the United States, it's not capitalism that we've been dealing with. It's corporatism. It's crony capitalism, if we will. Maybe it's fascism, if we will. The labels, the definitions, we get lost in them sometimes. But what we see is that the big government and the big corporations collude and work together to push a shared agenda. The corporations lobby the government puts laws and regulations in place to entrench and protect their position, and then they take as much money as they can from the public. We see this over and over. As a matter of fact, I saw this week JSX, which is an airline that flies local routes. I've used them many times. You can fly local routes like from Orange County to Phoenix or to San Francisco or to Vegas, for example. They're not a big national carrier like American Airlines or Southwest, but they're great. And when I need these short routes, I've used them. I love them. It's a perfect airline. And it's really cutting into the big airlines business model, which is good. We should have competition. We should have multiple choices. Competition brings better service, products, and prices for us. But the big airlines don't like this, and so now this week they are trying to shut JSX down. They're telling the FAA that, hey, they don't have, they're not following the regulations, they're not safe, whatever it is, even though they beat all their safety records. And this is an example of the big corporations, American Airlines, Southwest, Delta, et cetera, using the federal government to pass laws and regulations to prevent JSX or competitors to pop up so they can continue to make more money. All right. So this is how it works. Unfortunately, it's not capitalism. Capitalism is allowing JSX to operate. Corporatism is when the corporations and the government work together to do this. And so we can see that America, unfortunately, has changed, and the profit incentives are now driving the American police state. As a matter of fact, I saw Dinesh D'Souza, an awesome filmmaker, is coming out with a new movie. I think it's called Police State. I think it's out in November. I'll definitely be talking about it as it comes out. But it reminds me of a book that I often talk about, I think everyone should read, and it's The Law. It's written by Frederick Bastiat, and it's like a booklet. You could read about an hour and a half. If you're listening right now, open up your Amazon app and just buy it. It's called The Law, and you should read it. Everyone should read it. Have your kids read it. And Frederick Bastiat talks about a term in there called legal plunder. And he says, when plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men in society, over the course of time, they create for themselves a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. When plunder becomes a way of life, over the course of time, they create for themselves a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. So it's legal plunder, a way to legally steal from you. And that's exactly what we're seeing in this corporatocracy that we have today. And we can see this evidenced in this police state, as this article brought up that I thought was great. It was on Zero Hedge. And it shows this steady march of the police state at both the national, the state, and local levels, and the essential freedoms that are being trampled because of this, all in the mind and the single pursuit of power, but really profit. So if we look at this, we can see it all over. So, for example, like what's behind the blackout of real news? I mean, if we really saw properly disclosed and consistent reporting on these types of things, maybe the people would be outraged. Yet when you're bombarded with wall-to-wall news coverage and news cycles that change every few days, it's difficult for us to stay focused on one thing, namely holding the government accountable to abiding by the rule of law, and the powers that be understand this. All right, so it's part of the plan. If you want to know the real motives behind any government program, all you have to do, just like any good crime documentary or crime TV show would say, is follow the money trail, right? So if we follow the money trail, we quickly start to see what's going on. We can find out who profits from the American police state, who profits from Americans being surveilled, fined, scanned, searched, probed, tasered, arrested, imprisoned, and all those other things. The courts, which try them, the prisons, which incarcerate them, the corporations, which manufacture the equipment, the prisons, all of this being used by the American police state. Now, not only are Americans forced to spend more on taxes than the annual financial burdens of food, education, clothing, but those taxes are going to build your own prison. So let me give you some examples of this, of how this legal plunder works and how your tax dollars are literally going to build your own prison. So the roads, for example, the roads. We have, not just the police departments don't want to just pad their pockets from issuing speeding tickets. Now police departments have turned into asset forfeiture and speeding and red light camera schemes as means of growing their profits. Despite revelations of corruption, collusion, fraud, these money-making scams have been inflicted on unsuspecting drivers by revenue-hungry municipalities. So they have all kinds of schemes. Asset forfeiture, that's a whole another topic on its own, how much money they steal. We'll come back to that in a minute. But like the red light cameras and things like that. And then what about all the companies that make the red light cameras and all of these things? In the prisons, we can see now that states have quotas to meet for how many Americans go to jail. States have quotas for how many people go to jail. Increasing numbers of states now have contracted to keep their prisons to 90 to 100% capacity. All right? These prisons are being driven by profits, and now states have to keep them at full capacity. $70 billion private prison industry relies on the complicity of state governments to keep the money flowing. All the while, then prisoners are also being forced to provide cheap labor for private corporations. No wonder the United States has one of the largest prison systems in the world. What about the schools? The public schools have become a microcosm of the total surveillance state, which currently dominates America. They have a host of surveillance technologies, including video cameras, finger and palm scanners, iris scanners, RFID, GPS tracking devices to keep constant watch over their student bodies. Likewise, the military-industrial complex with its military weapons, metal detectors, weapons of compliance such as tasers, have succeeded in transforming the schools at great taxpayer expense and personal profit into quasi-prisons. So, with a profit motive. Now, of course, it's being sold to you for your safety. We have to keep your kids safe, right? So let's spend all this money with all these military-industrial complex companies to put the metal detectors in and the scanners in. What about the endless wars abroad? Fueled by, again, a profit-driven military-industrial complex, we have this ever-expanding military empire that's bleeding the country dry at a rate of more than $93 million per hour. The military-industrial complex is bleeding the country dry at $93 million per hour. What about the police? Now, there is obviously this whole defund the police BLM thing, which I'm not for getting rid of the police at all. 100% I'm not. I support the police. But I have been against the militarization of the police for a very long time. The Department of Homeland Security routinely hands out six-figure grants to enable local municipalities to purchase military-style vehicles, as well as veritable war chest of weaponry ranging from tactical vests, bomb disarming robots, assault weapons, combat uniforms. The rise in military equipment purchase funded by the DHS has, according to analysts, paralleled an apparent increase in local SWAT teams. And so now they're spending more money to keep you safe. All of these things are being done to continue to push power, continue to control the people, but more importantly, at a point of producing profit for these corporations. Corporatocracy. I just flew in last night. I had to go through TSA. Just look at TSA. Before TSA, you didn't have all that equipment. You didn't have. I was noticing they have these brand new X-ray scanners I hadn't seen before. I'm sure that cost a lot of money. I'm sure that was probably hundreds of billions of dollars that was given to a private company in a contract. This is the legal plunder that we were talking about. This is what happens when we have a corporatocracy. That's what happens when we have corporatism and the government work together to collude with the corporations to push their agenda. And it's going downhill quick. Now, one of the best ways we can protect ourselves for thousands of years is just not to play that game. We can get our money out of the system and we can go build our own parallel economies. And one of the ways you can get your money out of the system is by buying gold. And gold's been doing great in response to this. When the world saw Russia get their bank account seized, the rest of the world wanted to start buying gold. I've been buying gold, which is why it's up 19% since October. Silver's up 30% since last October. And I like to get my gold from Universal Coin and Bullion because I trust them. Dr. Mike Fulgens and his company wrote the record on how to watch out for fraud, how to prevent fraud with the Texas State Attorney General. And they have great prices and a very special offer just for my listeners. A special price on a silver 1 ounce American Silver Eagle coin with no dealer markup for just $27 each with a limit of 3. And they'll even send it to you for free and give you the free award-winning gold investment guide if you mention my name, Mark Moss. Give them a call, Universal Coin and Bullion, to get this $27 Silver Eagle coin deal today, plus great prices on any other gold that you want. Give them a call, 1-800-UCB-GOLD. Again, 1-800-UCB-GOLD. Or you can go online to universalcoin.com/Mark Moss. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Mark Moss Show, talking about the decentralized revolution. That's what I got for today. That's the latest breaking news headlines. Hit me up on social media. Check it out on the podcast. Just search The Mark Moss Show on your favorite podcast player. And that's what I got. Thanks so much for listening.